really have to worry about. You don't have to worry about that. All right, Tim. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really do appreciate it. It's another recurring guest, I have to say, for the Tweener Tennis channel. You are our gear guy. You are.
I appreciate that.
In terms of not just tennis gear, but cool gear that everyone's wearing in the tennis world, because I seem to think that you are always the one first on site when it comes to understanding what they're wearing or what they're supporting or what they're repping. So if you guys don't know Tim, you should know Tim by now. Follow him on Twitter. He writes a lot of great articles for Forbes, and he's been interviewing a lot of great players, and his pieces have been really interesting to read. So make sure to go check out Tim. And Tim, welcome back.
Thanks, Philip. I appreciate you having me. Always a pleasure to be on. And as you know, I enjoy talking tennis gear and a little bit of the tennis business side as well. So, fun opportunity.
I'm very excited to get into this with you because there was a lot of cool stuff, not just on the tennis gear side, but some of the specific shoe wear as well. And I think the first one, when we talked, I think last year or the last time I had you on, we really talked about Coco Gauff and her CG1. And for a signature shoe to be happening in tennis like that again is very, I would say it's rare, especially now that she's won a Grand Slam. And you even tweeted out that her colorway for the US Open sold out within a matter of hours after she won the tournament. And how many colorways did she have this year? If you can, if you're to guess.
Right, well, if we're going calendar year, now I should have reread my CG1 article. I chatted with Coco and all the New Balance folks right before US Open and did kind of a 1 year of the CG1. And I have Josh Wilder from New Balance in there telling me how many colorways they did, but they launched that first one, if you remember, at the end of July of 2022. And then they had a US Open colorway for 2022 that kicked things off. And so then they obviously had the Australian Open colorway. They had a kind of a sunshine colorway, if you will. The French Open, the Wimbledon, the US Open was at least the fifth. And I think there was another one in there in the calendar year 2023. So, you say it's pretty rare. It's the only signature sneaker in tennis right now for a current athlete. Obviously,
yes,
On had the Roger Pro that, is being worn. He's obviously not a current athlete, but it's fun because even tennis signature shoes didn't necessarily have that treatment that we're accustomed to with basketball, where you're getting new colorways, player editions, different special editions. And now we get that with the CG1, where we are getting new player editions. We're getting new stuff that people can buy, and it's just fun to watch.
It is, because it's fun to see that detail and to see an athlete kind of go beyond tennis. And with signature shoes, not just, you see it on the basketball side all the time. Someone that just released their own colorway or own shoe today was Ant, right? Not Ant. For the Timberwolves, who just had a colorway, a shoe developed for Adidas. Someone did, their star player. And for tennis, you don't see that very often. So to see, and I just looked up your article, and it's one of 10 different colorways for her shoe alone. And that's not going into detail with the other tennis shoes that they've made for some of the men and their colorway that they have, but it's not their signature shoe. What do you think is next for New Balance and Coco? Because this is when, I believe you also wrote about her when she first burst onto the scene, when she signed that $1 million deal with New Balance when she was 14, I believe, correct?
14, yeah.
14. And it was the biggest contract we've seen in tennis, at least for a teenager during that time. But now that she's won a Grand Slam, she has 10 colorways for her shoe. What do you think is the next step for her? Is it a clothing line? Is it the CG2? What do you think is the next step? Or do you know anything that you could tell us?
I mean, I think the answer to that is yes. I mean, they signed the extension with Coco following the US Open last year. So she's going to be with they didn't say how long, but she's going to be with New Balance for a while. They've obviously invested a lot of money in I don't think people understand that a signature shoe, or any shoe for that matter, takes a lot of money from a brand to invest in the research and development, and then, making all the prototypes and just the marketing and just all the behind the scenes money. So, which is one of the reasons we don't see signature shoes in tennis, but New Balance put the money in to do it. So they're definitely going to keep going. You will see a CG2.
Okay.
Not just because the CG1 is named that way.
Yeah.
But because that's where we're headed. It's not, obviously, if it was a basketball calendar, we would have seen the CG2 this US Open.
Yeah.
But it's not on a basketball calendar. It's on more of a tennis calendar. So, we'll see one. It'll come. And, beyond that, what I've found interesting is we haven't seen them, them being New Balance, really accentuate the apparel side, because she has her own kits, her own on-court kits, but you can't buy them. Like the gear that she had at US Open, you can't go and buy. But it's, another thing we've talked about with On, and maybe we'll get to On later, but the idea of making a kit, a one-off for an athlete, is a whole different world than making something that's available at retail throughout, the sizing lines and what it has to do to get on your e-commerce site and all that. So I think that would probably be another step that New Balance would take, is just some more kind of apparel tie-ins, whether it's on-court kits, some lifestyle gear. I think we're just going to see them play off her more. And obviously, nothing could have been better for New Balance than her to actually win the Grand Slam in New York. In a CG1, the first edition. So now she's got one, obviously, and they had those t-shirts ready to go, call me champion.
How fast they all put it on too. 1 minute you see them all, and then the next one she's walking over to the box, it's all white shirts. I'm going, what did I miss? Like who had the bag ready to just go? Who had that ready to just throw it out?
Exactly. That's credit to the New Balance crew, to Coco's team. And it's also credit to, brands love to tell you how great the relationship is with their athletes. And the athletes, when you talk to them about brands, are obviously going to say how great it is, because, they're paying each other to make this happen, right?
Yeah.
But for them to do that does show. And I think it goes back to this fact that, New Balance signed her at 14. They've been loyal, committed. They gave her a signature shoe. They've proven that they're going to be there for her. And so I think there was a little bit of, hey, let's make this moment, a little extra special, and everybody in the box threw the t-shirt on. It's one thing to get the t-shirts to people, but it's another thing for them to actually put it on, right? And they had, we saw it on, for those on, watching on TV, it was right there. So a big moment for New Balance, a big moment, obviously, for the CG1, that bright lights colorway. We'll see more colorways. We'll see a CG2.
Okay.
We're going to see more lifestyle. I mean, if you remember back, we had that, I forget what they call it, but that tennis ball, kind of that fuzzy ace.
The fuzzy ace, right?
The fuzzy ace, that was a lifestyle. I mean, you're not going to wear that on the court. That was a lifestyle play. And we're going to see more of that kind of stuff. So we're going to see move into lifestyle. And I think apparel, whether it's performance or just lifestyle, will come along with that.
I agree. And it's kind of, if she does put out the apparel brand next year, and probably stuff that I don't, if she does kind of what Osaka did this past year, even though she didn't play, Osaka is still putting out Naomi Osaka Nike gear. They're still fully invested in her and still waiting for her to come back. But it's one of those where you're going to see a lot more coming out of the brand. And I like the way you said New Balance commitment, because we don't really see that with brands nowadays, at least in tennis. Unless you're a superstar, you're consistently in the top 20, top 10, you'll be with a brand for a while. But because New Balance has done this for, she's 19, 20 now, like 6
years. Yeah.
About 5 years.
Yeah.
So 5 years she's been committed with the brand. The brand has not stopped showing her loyalty in fully throwing them at it. So I was actually curious to know, because the shoe is labeled as unisex. I know Ben Shelton once wore when he first came out onto the tour. But do you think more men will wear this shoe on tour? Or do you think more athletes will wear this type of shoe?
I hope so. That's one thing that I have been a little surprised we haven't seen is any other New Balance athletes in the Coco shoe.
Okay.
Um, we see that in basketball. Obviously, the Kobe shoe, for a time, the Kobe shoe was the most worn shoe in the NBA.
It's still
Um,
it's still up there. It's still top 5
it's
shoes.
Yeah, and that's even when Kobe was playing, right?
Yeah.
And there's a couple things going against that for tennis.
Okay.
One is New Balance is not Nike for a while signed everybody, right? They
Yep.
had the most athletes in the sport. So where New Balance was taking a more measured approach, kind of all in on Coco, had a handful of a couple other athletes. If you think about it, New Balance doesn't have a ton of tennis athletes. So it's not like there's 100 athletes. So if you can get one of them to wear the shoe, then that's great. There's literally a handful or two of athletes. So, it might be tougher to convince somebody. The second thing
Yeah.
is how many opponents of Coco want to wear her shoe. I'm not on the tour myself, but I can't imagine. There's stories in the NBA all the time about, somebody wears the LeBron shoe, but when they
Wally.
play LeBron, they
They
switch
don't
to
wear.
something else when they're in LA to play the Lakers because they
Yeah.
don't want, that kind of thing. So, and then the other thing is tennis players are notorious for not switching gear. The
Yeah.
only time they ever switch gear is in the incredibly short off season. And so there's not a lot of time to get them to switch. And I can't imagine there's a lot of interest from the female athletes to wear an opponent's signature shoe.
Mm-hmm.
And New Balance just doesn't have a ton of athletes. So you take all those things, and I'm not sure we're going to see, tour level players in the CG1.
Well, let me ask you this too. If there are some that wear New Balance, but it's more, you don't, I agree. They haven't signed that many players. The most prominent players that New Balance has signed in the last couple years, or that still wear New Balance, I should say, are Tommy Paul on the men's side. Milos Raonic was wearing New Balance for a long time before he went on to his kind of sidetrack recovery. I think Heather Watson still wears New Balance. Sorana Cristea from Romania wears New Balance. But that's where, as of right now, if I had more time, I would definitely look it up. But those are the 3 to 4 players that come to mind that wear New Balance. So I agree that there are not that many players to rep New Balance to say, oh, we can also wear these. But for men's players that maybe wear New Balance, especially a guy like Tommy Paul, who is kind of out there with his fashion as well, kind of like a Riley Opelka, I'm surprised we haven't seen him wear kind of the colorway that he wears now on the CG1s, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the other thing you have to think about, though, is New Balance has a lot more than the CG1, right? I mean, that's their pinnacle shoe. That's the most expensive. You go online, right? That's one of the most expensive tennis shoes you can buy.
Yep.
Having played in it, I love it personally. I think it's a great shoe, well made. But it is an expensive shoe. It's not the only shoe they're selling.
Mm-hmm.
They have another premium shoe, the CT Rally. They have the 996.
Yeah.
So when you have just a few players, Jeannie Bouchard's another player. I don't know if she's, obviously she just played in Mexico.
That's a
pickleball,
different
she's
story.
another New Balance person, but just to throw that in the mix. But
yes,
take Tommy Paul, they're using him, which is kind of interesting. They're using him as the face of some of these other marketing plans. Now he's been wearing the TT Rally since it came out, but he's also been the face of the 996.
Yep.
So, you have just a few of these people that you have in brand. And so if you put everybody in the CG1 or try to get, say you're trying to get Tommy in it, maybe he loves it or not, but you got to still sell these other shoes because not everybody's dropping. I think it's 170 for a CG1.
169.
Yeah. Not everybody's going to do that. You have to push some of your other lines as well.
Yeah.
And you have only a few players, so you have to use them strategically. So some of it's a marketing strategy as well.
Okay. Because, and this will be the last thing that I point out, because we have a lot of other brands that made an impact this year, is both of them are starting to get national commercials or at least advertisements that you see on the website for Tommy Paul being kind of the face of New Balance tennis on the site that's not Coco. Coco Golf had a national commercial with another New Balance star. So New Balance is there, but the CG1 is the second, according to my knowledge off the top of my head, the CG1 is the second most expensive tennis shoe and signature shoe behind the Roger on.
Yep.
So in terms of a price point, if you really want it, you'll buy it. Will I buy it? Yes. Will you have one? Yes. But for those that play recreationally, people that I teach, probably not. They'll probably go for the 996 or the CT Rally. So I understand your point from that perspective.
Yeah.
The other brand that I just mentioned, and I feel like we have to go there, is On Running. This year, besides Roger's retirement at the end of last year, it was last year, right? Yes, I'm not losing my mind.
Yeah, Laver Cup last year, so basically a year from
now.
Yeah.
On launched its own tennis line. And the two athletes that they signed were Iga Swiatek and Ben Shelton. Ben Shelton now represented by Team 8, Rogers management company. Iga, #1 player in the world. Well, I should say #2 player in the world, but has dominated tennis in the last 2-3 years in terms of Grand Slams. On Running now is seen not only as, and now an On Running commercial just popped up on the Forbes article that I pulled up for you. So my computer's listening to me. That's weird. But now their own apparel collection, but not on sale. But this is the first year On has put out consistent products for their athletes or for their athletes on both sides.
Yep.
Tell us about On this past year from your perspective.
On admits that making a on-court tennis shoe was a little trickier than they were anticipating. And you'll hear that brands that are in tennis and have made tennis shoes for a long time love to tell you that it's harder to make a tennis shoe than brands thought. Just if you have listeners that don't know, a running shoe, now granted, running is by far the #1. That's where brands make their money, is the running shoe. If you think about it, everybody buys a running shoe, whether they're walking or just going to the grocery store or running. Running shoes are what people buy. So that is the #1. #2 is basketball. But if you think about running, it's linear. It's just straight. You don't have to worry about cutting. You don't have to worry about support. It's running. So it's basically, what kind of cushioning do you want to deal with? Where making a tennis shoe, not only do you have the cushioning needs, you have the stability needs, you have the lateral support. It's a complicated endeavor. So it's taken them maybe a little bit longer to dial that in than they were anticipating. You see that with Iga still wearing her ASIC stuff on foot. But at the same time, they also had to ramp up their production, and just, the line to make a tennis shoe is different than the line to make a Cloud Nova or whatever their #1 running shoe is, right? It's a different process. So there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that had to ramp up to meet the demand. And there was demand, because they were selling out of the Roger Pro. The blue colorway was basically the only,
it was gone.
It was gone immediately every time. And so it's neat to see that they've kind of caught up on that. You've got multiple colorways of the Roger Pro. The Roger Pro is a polarizing shoe. Some people love it. Some people hate it. Some people love it because it's Roger. Some people love it because it looks different and it feels different and it plays different with the carbon fiber shank and everything. Some people hate it because they think it's too stiff. Now, there is the outsole is a whole different discussion. That thing's gone immediately. So like you said, if you're going to spend, that's the most expensive tennis shoe you can buy, is the $200 for the Roger Pro from On. And your outsole durability is, you can get a Vapor Light for more durable, than the Roger Pro outsole. But that's an issue. And so there's things like that where they have to figure it out. But at the same time, yes, we've got more colorways. You can go online. They're not all sold out.
No.
So that's been fun to see that. Ben Shelton, obviously, in the Roger Pro 2, that's not out. He's been wearing that for a while now. And so, it's just a matter of time before we see that. And, we can talk about the apparel line coming out too. So I don't know where you want me to head on that. I kind of just rambled, so I apologize for that.
No, it's perfect, because I think from that conversation too is, and you've touched on it before, but the first thing I wanted to talk about on was the tinkering with Iga's shoe. Yeah. Is she getting her own on shoe, or is it still going to be the Roger for females?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
And if I did, I probably would be under embargo on it anyway. But
fair enough.
She's in a Roger version right now.
With a pink colorway, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's still, she's not wearing them in competition. I mean, you saw her. She's testing them out. They're prototypes still. She's testing them out. She's testing. I mean, she wore them at US Open during some practice sessions.
Same at Western and Southern, which was the first time we saw those. And now she's wearing them in Japan or China, I believe, right now. Someone caught her practicing in them, but we have yet to see her in them for an actual competitive match.
Exactly. And she probably won't. And I don't know for sure. I haven't talked to Iga or her team on the timing, but I know in New York, wasn't they were surprised she even wore them in practice a little bit.
Really?
Probably they weren't expecting her to, it goes back to that. It's the off season, she's super dialed in on, she knows what she wants on what she wants, whether, for her gear. And so I would expect in the off season, everything gets sorted. If she'll be on for, for the Australian Open for sure. I mean, she's obviously very close if she's wearing them in practices and whatnot. And maybe by the end of this year, even she'll have them on, before the season ends. But yeah, I don't know what they're naming it, but as of right now, it's you got to think there's another version of the Roger coming, the Roger Pro Clubhouse as well. So in 2024, there's going to be some varying versions of the Roger performance side, because obviously you have the off court with the Advantage, the Clubhouse, and the court and the Spin, which is in my mind one of the coolest lifestyle tennis shoes out right now, because they're crazy comfortable. If people haven't tried on,
very comfortable.
It's super comfortable. The Spin has to be arguably the most comfortable lifestyle tennis shoe right now, because it does have some elements of a performance shoe, although it's not a performance shoe. So you have those four technically, lifestyle shoes that are in the Roger line. And then you're going to have next year at some point 2 performance shoes with the Roger Pro 2 and then the Roger Pro Clubhouse, I believe. I could be misstating that, off memory, but it's very likely that we'll see Iga in one of them and Ben in the other one.
And for that too, is there talks about having a second, less expensive on tennis shoe? Because I know everything is tied to Roger in terms of their performance shoe for tennis, but will there be one that is maybe in that 150, 100 range that people can buy that's not the full $200?
I think one thing to think about when you think about On is go on their website and look and see how much a hoodie is and see how much a running shirt is, right? They're not trying to capture the player that wants a budget shoe. They see themselves as a premium brand. They started as a premium brand. They've had success as a premium brand. So, and that's one thing that they were unabashed about from the start of the Roger franchise is we're a premium brand. And so prices match that. And, for some regard, other than maybe the outsole on the hard court shoe, quality can match that too. I mean, you're getting a carbon fiber shank there's only 2 shoes with a, carbon fiber in them right now. And they're the 2 most expensive shoes in the market, the CG1 and the Roger Pro. So, I don't know for sure what the price points of the next 2 shoes are going to be, but if you're talking about offering a budget option, that hasn't been part of what On has done. Okay.
So it's not going to, so they're sticking to their mentality of quality over quantity.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think even the idea that you can't always get whatever colorway you want, I mean, that's part of
exclusive,
the exclusivity culture. I
Yeah.
mean, you go on, and we say you can go get a Roger Pro right now online. I believe the Indigo, which is the blue,
Yeah.
is pretty much available now, but that one's been out for what, a year and a half or
Yep. It's
2 years or
it was the
whatever.
initial Roger
It was the initial
colorway.
one. But if you go, I mean, they have the purplish one. I forget what color they call it, but the purplish one, and then they have a green, and which is pretty much sold out, and then they have like a teal that's pretty much sold out. So
Even
it's
the clay one too, correct?
the clay, the orange for the men, and then
that
kind of
was
that beige for the women.
the orange was a hit though when they announced clay court shoes with that colorway. It seemed a lot of people from my world really enjoyed that colorway. They loved the comfort of it because they wear on running shoes off the court. And the color of that, I thought, was their best color that they've come out with. That's
The
just my
orange,
opinion. The orange, it
I
just
love the
looks
orange.
so nice.
Yeah,
With the
the
clay
orange was
too,
great.
it's fantastic.
Yeah. I'm also partial to the teal and the green colorways that just came out this summer, but green's one of my personal favorite colors. So that's it. But I if you line them all up, all that they've done, and then you got to throw in the black that they did with Kith, a year or two ago when it first came out, which was it's super hard to get.
I really, really want those. The Kith ones that came out, I looked for them and then I found them and I was about to buy them for retail, and then it said over $500, and I immediately closed out all my tabs.
Yeah,
I wanted it so badly though.
I know. I'm a big fan of white and black. If anybody wants to send me shoes, I'll take the white with the black accent any day.
If anyone wants to send us free stuff,
yeah, I'll take anything. I'll even take the white with the purple. But no. So I think what you're seeing with On and what you're seeing with the Roger Pro right now is you can still get the shoe, but there's still exclusivity depending on the colorway.
So what about, and kind of going to that other side of it with their clothing, the ones that we saw Iga and Ben wear throughout this past year, not on sale. And we talked about this too. It again, kind of going along the lines of creating a new shoe line. It's hard to produce a line throughout the year with athletes that are wearing it for the masses, correct? So when you see these athletes, Iga and Ben specifically, wearing all this new stuff, I don't think they were ready for the mass production that they would need to sell everything.
Right. And the other thing to think about is US Open 2024. Nike knows what they're making. They're already making that. Adidas is already making that. Like the cycle on this stuff is so far out. I mean, it's the fashion world. People that follow it at all know this. It's nothing, I'm not giving anything new. But when you sign Ben and Iga, when they signed them in 2023, they hadn't been making all this stuff at the start of 2022. I mean, if you think of Ben Shelton, in January 2022, Ben Shelton was still at University of Florida, right? I mean, so, to get to the point where they're far enough ahead in their production cycles and their marketing planning and just all the back of house stuff that it takes to put something on an e-commerce site.
Yeah.
It takes time to get there. Roger's talked about this before. It's like they started with the center court and these lifestyle shoes because those you could get out quicker than going back and developing an entire, professional Roger Pro. And that's why we saw the lifestyle stuff first from them, which I thought was brilliant because it's like, let's get the product out there.
Get a little tease to it.
And then go from there. And so that's what we're getting with the apparel is, just like what we talked about with Coco, it's like On's making now tennis gear finally. I mean, when it started, they were in running gear. Now they're in tennis gear. Now they're mapping out what gear is going to look like in 2024. Now they're getting production going. I don't know for sure if it'll be Australian Open or French Open, or when exactly, but we'll be able, they'll start taking our money as soon as they can, right? As soon as they have that
It
gear
ready to launch.
ready to launch, they will launch it. It'll be 2024 at some point. It's just a matter of, it's a new brand still. I mean, obviously they've done well in running, but if you think of tennis, it's a brand new brand to tennis. And, you know, another thing we could talk about, there's a lot of new brands to tennis that are just apparel.
Yep.
You know, whether it's a Lululemon or a Vuori or Free People, you know, some of these athleisure type brands. But they're not doing the shoes, you know, because they're not a shoe brand, right? They're an athletic apparel brand. So On's just catching up from entering a new space
and doing a whole different line too, for that matter. It's not just running, it's everything. They're doing everything kind of from scratch. Right. And that's going to be the hardest thing to do, in my opinion. And if we were to transition over to a Nike or Adidas, the first one I would like to point out is Nike, because one of the biggest commercials, I would say, this past year or campaigns was the McEnroe shoe coming back, and somehow Travis Scott was in that entire commercial. Please explain. How do you get John McEnroe and Travis Scott into the same room and just say, hey, you're advertising a tennis shoe now? Didn't see that coming.
Yeah, you know, and that's what Nike's always done for decades, right? Is they've surprised you a little bit, especially in the tennis space. You know, they've tried to be different. The anti-country club that started with McEnroe, you know, and Agassi. So it's fun. I think it's good. Nike had a few years there where tennis, they weren't doing anything fun. You know, you could argue, they weren't producing the retro stuff. I did like in 2020 where they had some of the Agassi Challenge Court stuff make a return. That was cool.
Kind of a throwback.
That. Yeah, the throwback stuff. Whether you liked how they did it or not, you got to appreciate that they tried it.
The nostalgia of it was just in itself got people's attention, because people recognized the outgoing colors and denim look that they were throwing out towards everyone. Yeah.
And it was unfortunate timing, because that was obviously the first COVID US Open. So you don't have fans there. So it was, hard to market it. Everything, got mixed up there. And then you just lost a little bit in, 21 and 22. There wasn't a lot going on with Nike. And 23, we have the Mac Attack, and that was cool. And obviously Travis Scott sells, right? So, so getting him on board was just a key marketing, position for Nike, and that worked out well. And I think it helped that, that you have some of these names outside of the sport. LeBron wore them, a year or two ago. You have some of these names outside of tennis, putting them on and kind of reminding people that Nike still is the biggest retro player in tennis. Obviously there's still a major, current modern player in tennis as well. Even though some of the lines have shifted and changed quite a bit, they're still capable of doing whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it. And they can do it well if they choose to. And I think the Mac Attack launch was fun for fans of my age. It's cool whenever you get a retro sneaker come back, and they did more than just one. That's the other thing that's fun, is there's multiple kinds. There's the Travis Scott version. If you're a sneakerhead and want to, spend some serious coin, you can do that, or you can just get like the gray version or the white and black version. That's a little bit more affordable, an access point that more people can get, to have something fun. Alcaraz wearing them. Alcaraz, the first player other than Kyrgios really to switch shoes while he's on the court. Like, he switched out of his on-court performance shoes at the US Open into some Mac Attacks, for the on-court interview. And I'm not so sure, based on those interviews, he knew exactly what he was wearing, but he at least was wearing, Mac Attacks in front of everybody and getting
the New York crowd too.
The New York crowd and having, Patrick asked, I think it was Patrick McEnroe that asked him about, you're wearing my brother's shoes, or whatever that was, that one match. So that's been fun. And then obviously you have the Foamposite or the Courtposite, the tennis version of the Foamposite that Alcaraz teased and Supreme's coming out with. So that created more buzz and shows that, oh, Nike's still interested in what they've done in tennis, because the 80s, 90s Nike tennis is arguably the greatest, session of tennis sneakers. Although, Adidas might argue that they did just fine in the 70s as well. But
that's different.
Yeah, it's a different type of consumer and look. And so it's fun to see that not only do we have the Mac Attack, you're going to have the Court Posit, which obviously was a atrocious on-court shoe, but it has lifestyle swagger.
I love it. I have the original blue one that I found online, and to be honest, I love it as a regular shoe. I tried playing with it. Sucks. Absolutely sucks. But what can you tell us a date for those the gold foam posits for Supreme? You can't tell me when they're coming out.
I don't have that in front of me.
Okay,
but it's got to be soon. Like it's.
I would like to know.
Supreme teased them in their catalog thing. I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, no worries, because as soon as you posted about the Shaq Reebok shoes, I bought them immediately, and I
those
wear
were
them
fun too.
I wear them a lot. They're very comfortable. In terms of the on-court stuff that Nike's doing too is, one, since we're still in that shoe conversation, Tiafoe's Zoom GP Challenge ones. He's the only one right now that is currently wearing them, correct?
Yeah. From what I know, I haven't seen anybody else wearing them.
What can you tell us about those in terms of what you've seen or what you've heard or what you've...
Well, he's been a bit unique on Nike's, what people have worn, because he did the Zoom Zero, which a few guys did the Zoom Zero and a few gals did the Zoom Zero. That was a popular shoe on the tour until that went away fairly quickly. I know it had some, the buying public didn't love the durability of it. So it made it tough for people spending money. Obviously, these pro players can get new shoes as needed, right? So so he was a big Zoom Zero guy. He was a big GP Turbo guy.
Love those.
I remember being at Indian Wells right before Osaka signed with Nike when she was still with Adidas.
Yeah.
And the two of them were practicing, and I just happened to be there and they were talking about it, and she was asking him about the GP Turbo, and he was telling her how much he loved that shoe. And then obviously that's the shoe that she has worn and, has quite a few player editions in. So he's been in that line, because the GP Turbo was what the Zoom Zero turned into the GP Turbo. Now we're going to have a challenge, GP Challenge 1 or whatever it's being called, probably in 24. So, it's just kind of a continuation. Where it's basically what it is for those that don't know, you're getting full length Zoom. So the cushioning is off the charts.
That's why I like the GP Turbo. And that to me was a shoe that went away too quickly, because the comfort level that it had, and for being a bulkier shoe, it still was pretty light on the court. And I loved using it because of how, not durable, but because it had a good balance that you wouldn't expect out of a tennis shoe.
Yeah, it was arguably one of the most comfortable shoes on the market. And I think, especially for somebody like you who's on the court all day, teaching folks, some people like it for that reason, that you can wear it more than just your hour and a half or whatever it is you're playing. If you need to be walking on hard surfaces in an athletic environment, it's a great tennis shoe versus some of the speed focused shoes that, don't have a lot of cushion. If you're in it for 6-8 hours, that's a long time to not have cushioning. Exactly. Where if you're wearing a shoe for 6-8 hours, you need the cushioning. So, that's a whole nother, market segment that loved that shoe and will continue to love having that full length Zoom Air.
And for me too, I feel like, is that going to be his shoe from Nike? Because if we're going to talk about not signature shoes, but staple shoes for players, that seems to be the one that he is recognized for compared to everyone else, because there was other players at the beginning when the GP Turbo first arrived. Sinner was a big one before he went back to the cage. I believe it was the cage, correct? Or where did he
Sometimes he still wears the Zoom Zero.
Exactly. So I for me, that's going to be his shoe, or at least Nike's going to market that shoe for him.
Yeah, Tiafo, we'll see him in that shoe. We'll see. I would presume that we will see marketing when they market the new release. He will be the face of that. He'll be the marketing campaign. Doesn't hurt that he's, reaching around his highest. Obviously he broke the top 10. I think he's 11 now, or
Yeah,
wherever.
just outside of it.
Yeah. So I mean, he's right there. He's the best spot he's been. His name's only getting bigger. The Breakpoint Netflix stuff helps with that. Everybody loves him. Fan favorite, player favorite. So his stock is rising for Nike, as is Alcaraz. So they have, these two guys that are coming up, and of course you're going to use Tiafo, when you go to market that shoe.
Yeah.
I mean, what they did for him at US Open, I mean, putting Big Foe on a special colorway of a shoe that's not even out yet. I mean, we're talking about a shoe that's not released yet. And I know that's kind of what we do here, but it's creating buzz, and he's helping that. So yes, that'll be, people will talk about that shoe as, oh, that's Tiafo's shoe.
Yep.
And I think that only helps Nike because you have that. And, just another point on that, because Nike doesn't really do the signature shoe thing, they get the best of both worlds in that, because you're going to have somebody walk into a retail site or go online and be like, what's Francis Tiafo's shoe?
Yeah.
And it'll come up without having to have the signature element to it.
Yep.
So they can get kind of the best of both worlds there when you have a big name like him, especially in America, be the face of a shoe. Hopefully, Nike folks are doing this where they're getting a bunch of player editions and limited editions that he's wearing, that are can create some extra buzz without having to, go crazy with it. But, hopefully it's a lot of fun.
It should be. And the last two athletes for Nike we have to talk about, we'll start with the women's side with Sabalenka. Sabalenka was the only one this year, for those of you that may not know, Sabalenka was the only one to get her own custom piece from Nike, which is a very rare thing to see, at least on the women's side. And but if your name is not Serena Williams or Maria Sharapova,
right,
two names that have been with the brand forever and did a lot for them.
By custom piece, for those that don't know, Philip's talking about at the US Open, she had a dress that was just her colorway, that nobody else had. So we didn't have that lovely two players in the exact same outfit playing on the court together.
Which is the best way of describing that, because with every athlete now being given the same stuff, it's obviously a problem that not a lot of fans like.
Right.
But how much is Nike now going to invest in the new number one? Because is this a lead up to the 2024 season for her with the brand, or is this kind of a one-off thing that was just happened for the US Open?
That's a great question that I don't have the answer to, but we'll find out soon.
Okay.
The other thing to think about is, could you buy the Sabalenka dress? So, how much value is there in doing something different if we're not going to have retail behind it? It's, with the Sharapova stuff, you could, for a while, if I remember correctly, you could buy Sharapova stuff, you could buy Serena stuff, and then you could buy the inline stuff,
the regular stuff, essentially. That wasn't
everybody
like
else
tagged. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how Nike handles the Sabalenka success. I think it's cool when they do that, even if they're not doing it for a retail play, that they're doing it as a, hey, almost like a congratulations, you've earned this status, is what it's like. And I think that's great for the game. I think it's great for those top players. It shows that a Nike's still interested in the sport to the level that they recognize, and want to reward that. So even if that's not going to be at retail, I would think we're going to see that play out in 2024. It was probably something that happened after she won Australian, and it, comes through the pipeline and until she, gets to US. And so I would hope that we would continue to see that. It'll be interesting to see how much they play off of her, but hopefully they do.
Well, it's funny because I feel like, not funny, but I find it interesting, and I have to find better adjectives in my vocabulary with this. because for her too, with the whole Ukraine situation, it's I get confused about the publicity side of it. If a person from this country who can't represent their own country in a international sport gets their own line or special treatment from a brand. Not saying that they're responsible for it, but it's seems like a double-edged sword for those players.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's maybe more a double-edged sword for the brand is, how
Yeah.
much do you want to go in on
Mm-hmm.
Russian, or in Sabalenka's case, Belarus.
Yeah.
How much do you want to invest in those players right now? Lacoste seems to be doing just fine investing in Medvedev, who's Russian. So yeah, I mean, it's a question that
it's tough to answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's there, right? I mean, it goes back to that whole, Russia tennis debate thing is, well, how much, I mean, we don't need to get into the politics of it in a gear discussion, but, like you said, how much does that matter to a brand or to a consumer where a player is from, and then connect that to the politics and the decisions of the government, so to speak, from that place that a player is from, that
Exactly.
I guess it will change some buying habits. I would guess that there are people that will not buy something that is promoted by a Russian player out of some principles. I would also guess that there'll be a lot of people that would say that I don't know that which shoe I buy is based on, well, so-and-so endorses it and he or she is from this country, so therefore I can't buy that shoe that's made from an American company or whatnot. So it can get pretty convoluted pretty quickly.
I agree. I agree. And the other athlete we had to talk about with Nike is, I would say, the golden child of the next generation with Alcaraz, because from all the exclusive shoes that he's wearing off the court to what he's representing on the court, and the ad that they had at the end of Wimbledon when he won, that was a bit of a teaser, right? Because is that his logo for the brand now, or is that just something that they did to add to the campaign?
I think it was probably something they did to add to the campaign. We haven't seen yet anything that's specific to Alcaraz, as far as, I mean, you even talked about, Sabalenka had her own dress. Alcaraz was still in the inline kits at US Open.
Which is weird to say too, for someone like that who won it now, definitely in the Mac attacks, but doesn't get that same quote unquote treatment for on court clothing.
And the other thing you have to think about with this, and I'm not saying anything positive or negative about any specific player, but there's certain players that push for that and certain players that don't care at all. So you could have, and again, I don't know the inside, so I'm not saying that Sabalenka pushed for that or that her agent was like, we need to make this happen, but that could have been the case. And Nike said, okay, that's fine. You've earned it. Alcaraz does not appear to be somebody who's pushing for that type of treatment, doesn't care so much what he wears, just, I'm going to go out and play and have fun. I mean, he's a young kid, right? So it's not as important to him maybe that he's in a different outfit or that he gets special treatment. Maybe that's just a personality thing, or maybe that's coming and we don't know. And so he's just being patient. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. You've seen, Nike has some new players now. We already talked about Tiafoe. I think Alcaraz is obviously the biggest. When you look at, what they're doing with him, you mentioned he's getting some heat, as they like to say in the sneaker world, that he's wearing, that he's posting on social media, right?
Yes.
So that's where they're getting their play from him on some of these other products, and it's working great because he does. I mean, the people that follow Alcaraz, that's the demographic that
you want buying.
Exactly. Yeah, so they're going to focus on him, and they'll do with Alcaraz what they need to do to make it work. And I'm not going to sit here and question anything that Nike's doing, because they're obviously doing okay.
Obviously, with Nike being the corporation they are and the athletes that they have, what do you expect for 2024 in terms of the line for him or for Tiafo for Nike? Are they pushing anyone out specifically, or do we know anything that could possibly happen with because I only asked that because we saw when, I don't know if they were custom or Nike made them for him, with the dunks that Alcaraz received not too long ago with the head, heart, and huevos, cabeza, corazón, and yeah, you guys can translate that. But he got his own pair of custom dunks from Nike, or did someone make those for him? Because
I don't remember the story on those.
Because I really wanted to see if they were actually going to release a shoe based on the head, heart, and balls comment that he was making, because I thought cabeza, corazón, y cojones, that though, but Nike made those according to what people are saying, with the motto that his grandfather gave him. So I thought that was a small step forward when it came to what Nike's willing to do for the young Spaniard.
And the other thing to think about is, it's one thing to make a one-off pair of shoes. We've talked about this a few times, right? I mean, Tiafoe's pair for US Open, that pair for Alcaraz, whatever, if they have the shoe, they can run it through the factory in Beaverton, throw some stitching on it, and they can make a one-off pair. I mean, there's obviously people around the globe that, will take your shoe and customize it, right? That's a business now. And so that's a different than, let's make another shoe that's sold at retail. That's a whole different, is there a large enough market of people that will buy it to make it worth the production costs to do it? And so sometimes it's just a matter of celebrating moments, that brands will do something like that so that it'll get noticed, people will talk about it, and it's fun and it's interesting and it's cool, and they don't need to sell it because they're not planning on making a lot of money off it, but they're showing, we like the guy, we're invested in the guy, we're going to try to, enjoy what he enjoys. We're going to reward him with something fun and special. And we're going to get some really cool social media play when he posts it on his Instagram and TikTok and whatever it is. It's going to show the swoosh all over the place. So you're not going to necessarily go buy those dunks because you can't, but it's just like advertising, right? We got a bunch of free swooshes in front of our face because we thought it was cool. Exactly. And that's fine. And you got to appreciate that. And you got to appreciate that they're not going to make every shoe. I mean, you think basketball, there's so many player editions that you can't buy. Whether it's a team edition for the University of Oregon, or player editions for top players, and it creates buzz and people like it, but they can't produce everything. But they're having fun with the sport and they're embracing the sport. And I think that's what we need to see from Nike after a couple of years where maybe people were questioning how much they cared about tennis because it is such a small piece of their pie, that they're now doing some of this stuff, whether it's the Mac attacks and the court posit, or a player edition for Foe, a player edition for Alcaraz, even though it's on a dunk, different things like that. That's exciting because it shows that they're still into it. They're invested in what's going on. And it, hopefully for them, it changes the narrative of, are they still making tennis shoes? They're doing some interesting things in the sport, whether or not we can always buy it.
Exactly. And Tim, I can't thank you enough for coming on to the channel again and talking about this stuff. I want to ask one last question for you two. Is there any piece of gear or technology that we may have missed during our conversation? I know we talked a lot of big athletes, big brands, but is there anything that we may have missed in 2023 that should be noticed?
I think what's funny is we just talked for an hour or whatever it was, and we just covered a handful of sneakers.
I know.
And so really, yes, I mean, we could go, we didn't talk about rackets at all.
I know.
And we didn't have time, right? It's like, and there's a lot of brands in tennis that that deserve to be mentioned. So I guess that's what I want to say is yes, On, New Balance, Nike. I mean, I think those were the only three brands we really covered.
Yep.
You know, because of some of the moments. You know, Fila's doing some fun stuff. Diadora's making some really cool shoes right now.
Yeah.
Mizuno is putting out some quality tennis shoes right now.
Okay.
They don't have the star athletes necessarily wearing them. You know, Yonex is making new shoes and quality stuff. And, you know, if you want to talk about tennis equipment, I mean, that's, you know, that's a
Yonex
brand
has been
blowing up, right?
Yeah.
Even Wilson's stuff, it's getting
That's
better. You know, Wilson, I love Wilson. So, you know, I think the thing that we sometimes get so focused on is the Nike, the Adidas, the New Balance, and then what On's doing.
Yeah.
And those are all fun stories. And don't get me wrong, I love talking about New Balance. I think what they did with Coco and even their shoe lines are some of the best. I can't believe I just haven't even mentioned Asics yet. I mean, they are
I was surprised that you haven't.
Shoes.
Yeah.
Like that, you know, I feel bad now that I'm thinking about it. It's like the Gel Res 9. If you ask me, if I get asked all the time, what tennis shoe should I get? The Asics Gel Res 9 is one of the most recommended shoes from me because it fits so many different types of players.
Yeah.
And so many feet that if I don't know somebody very well, my general is what shoe fits you best? You know, what brand do you enjoy? A lot of them are making quality stuff. You know, but if I don't know them very well, the Gel Res 9 is a great shoe. And then what they're doing with Novak on the Court FF, you know, it's a pretty niche shoe. Not everybody, you know, wants that feel.
But it's still the brand for him and for tennis people, tennis users. And that's another company. If we talk about running specific shoes, Asics is one of those companies that global juggernaut, running shoe, tennis shoe. And we're gonna have
they've been making tennis shoes for a long time and they know what they're doing.
Exactly.
So I guess to answer your question is if somebody's listened through this whole thing, which thank you by the way for listening. That's
thank you.
Awesome.
Yes, thank you.
you would get from us that Nike, New Balance, and On are the only ones making shoes. But I would argue that take a look, not take a look at those three, but take a look at everybody else. Diadora is crushing it. Asics is crushing it. You know, even what we're seeing from, you know, Mizuno and Fila and Wilson and and Yonex, and I'm sure I'm leaving other people out. You know, there's some super cool stuff being made. Some of these, I guess you would call them equipment brands. I mean, Babolat even makes a really good shoe.
Which I've been
different shoes, the Purples and the Mach, the Jet Mach.
The SFX3 is one that I've been wearing for work as well. And honestly, it's so comfortable. Yeah. And I must say that was the first Babolat shoe I've ever worn, but it's one that I genuinely wear. And without judgment, it's amazing. Yeah. And I think it's great. And so
I think some of these equipment brands are really catching up to some of the footwear brands. And
I like that.
And there's a lot of quality options for players at a lot of different variety needs and price points.
I agree. And I feel like we could talk for another hour about this. We definitely can. But in terms of the other brands, if I could get you to say one Diadora shoe that you love this year, one Asics shoe that you love this year, one Wilson shoe, and one Fila shoe. Those four.
Oh, wow. Put me on the spot because I'm going to butcher the names. I always mess up the names. So Diadora, is it the B icon or am I thinking lifestyle? So
let me see.
That's the shoe. That's a great shoe, especially if you have a little bit narrower foot. That is a super quality.
The B icon. Yep.
Yeah. The B icon 2. I like it better than the 1. Good adjustments there. So the B icon 2 is super cool. That's one of the best shoes out there right now. Okay. And that's definitely their best shoe. The Wilson, I mean, the Rush, the 4.0, it's just getting better every time they make it. They've got new people even working on stuff. I think they're only going to get better at shoes and apparel. So I would expect big things from Wilson, but that Rush 4.0 is a quality shoe. It's a good shoe. What are the other brands you wanted me to mention?
Asics and Fila.
Asics. The Gel Res 9 is one of the best shoes on the market, so that's a clear winner. Some people love, if you want more of a speed shoe, the Solution Speed, which is what Ego is wearing, is a quality shoe as well. The Gel Res 9 is more your baseline shoe. And then Fila, they just came out with that new.
It looks like an alien. That new
Mondo Forza or whatever, and I believe I butchered the name. So I had
Let's find out.
on that one. And so that's interesting. I'm excited to play in that. It's got
it is the Mondo Forza.
Yeah.
And it's a new look too that I haven't seen them do in a very long time when it comes to that, because it's a very sleek side, air holes on the top of it, and a mesh look at the toe. So and I saw it at the US Open too. A lot of the athletes that are signed by Fila were wearing those shoes, and it seemed that it looks nice. It looked better in person than I thought it would. I will say that.
It's a unique look. And then if you flip it and look at the outsole, you've got probably 40% of that outsole is completely like treadless, which is just crazy on a hard
just
court.
saw the photo.
So,
oh my God.
But pros were wearing them at the US Open, so it's obviously working. So I think what's great about that, and if you read the article I wrote on that, Fila's working with their Italian like high level development R&D team to make these shoes, which is great. It's all about investment in the sport. In my view, what's only going to help is when brands are investing in the sport, they're going to come out with new product. It's interesting whether it works or not, we'll see. But at least they're doing new stuff and trying new stuff. And so that's pretty fun to see.
It's incredible to see how much we didn't touch on. And I feel like I have to have you back just to talk about everything else on this channel. But
we don't want to make your listeners just, get completely tired of me. So you can't have me on too much because all I talk about is gear. So
no, that's fine.
We didn't even get to talk about
anything.
Shelton and Tiafo and Roger and all my conversations with them and whatnot. So maybe we will have to do another one.
We're gonna have to do another one. But guys, if you don't know Tim, you should. This conversation is probably one of the best ones I have throughout the year. Tim is a recurring guest, so please show him some love down in the description. Check out his Twitter, check out his articles, check out everything. Make sure though, once you do, make sure to tell him to come on every month so we can talk about something new. I would like to start a series with Tim, Tweener Head exclusive, to have him come on as much as we can.
Maybe we can find some time to do that.
2024.
Well, we'll talk. We'll talk offline and see if we can carve out a little bit more time, because I do love talking about this stuff, and we just touched on some of the basics of the sneakers. We didn't get into rackets. We didn't get into personalities. We didn't get into contracts and different things like that. So there's a lot going on in the tennis gear / business side of things, and so I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate any follows I get on Twitter or Insta with the Felt Alley Tennis account there that I'm trying to start. Just it's fun to look at this stuff.
It is, and make sure to go check out Felt and Alley Tennis.
Felt Alley Tennis.
Felt Alley Tennis on Instagram. Let's try to get him to 1,000 followers. Leave a comment down below of what gear you want us to talk about next when Tim comes back on the channel. Hopefully Tim comes back on the channel, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and consider turning the notifications on, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks again, Tim. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.